Hi, I'm going to talk about the second book that I've DNF'd this year, which is Blindness by Jose Saramago. I'll preface this by saying that I'm in the minority opinion of this book. It's won awards, it has a high rating on Goodreads, the author has a Nobel Prize Award for literature, so this is just my criticism and opinion of it as one rando on the internet, and it's not objectively a bad book. But blindness is basically about an epidemic, a blindness, white blindness as it's called in the book. And it's a dystopian novel that follows these groups of people who go blind and they're quarantined in this mental asylum. And they're quarantined under government lockdown. And then we follow them as they devolve. It goes into chaos. A lot of criminal groups form that steal rations and violently assault women. And then there's one woman who is the wife of a doctor, and she sees, so she's not blind, and she bears witness to this all. So on a deeper level, it's a look at the human condition and human nature. It's dystopian, it's incredibly bleak. Society dissolves into complete disarray. People are walking through and sleeping in their feces. Women are facing horrific acts of violence. So I got about 35% through this and I DNF'd, and I read enough reviews to get a pretty good gist of what happened. There was a lot of promise at the start of the book. I've been excited to read this for a long time, and I do think it's an interesting premise. But unfortunately, I really disliked the writing style. I got used to it a little bit at the beginning, and then it just became tedious to read. I also didn't find anything particularly insightful or interesting about the plot and the message. So the writing itself mostly consists of these giant run-on sentences with no quotation marks, very few periods, so you don't really know who's speaking very easily, which makes sense and is intentional because it adds to the disorientation that the people in the book are feeling and the panic. But like I said, it's just very tedious to keep reading and get through. And then the other thing that was distracting is it would switch point of view randomly, mid-sentence, so third person to first person to omnipresent or whatever, the God type view, and it was just, like I said, distracting. And it didn't seem to make sense sometimes when it would happen, so it would just take me outside of the book and the action. Besides that, none of the characters have really names or defining features. Again, intentional, but just makes it difficult to relate to any of the characters or feel like I'm a part of the story. And then aside from all of that, I started to find the premise kind of uncomfortable to read as a person who can see. And then while I was looking up reviews of people that DNF'd to see also what they thought, or people who gave low ratings, I came across protests that were held by blind activists at the release of the 2008 movie adaptation. And they argued that the depiction of blind people was offensive and harmful because it depicted them as depraved individuals. So this is an article from Blind Activist Plan Protest of Movie, Blindness by Ben Nuckols. It says, blind people quarantine in a mental asylum, attacking each other, soiling themselves, trading sex for food. For Mark Moorer, who's blind, such a scenario as shown in the movie Blindness is not a clever allegory for a breakdown in society. Instead, it's an offensive and chilling depiction that Moorer fears could undermine efforts to integrate blind people into the mainstream. He says, the movie portrays blind people as monsters, and I believe it to be a lie, said Moore, president of the Baltimore-based National Federation of the Blind. Blindness doesn't turn decent people into monsters. So I'm not visually impaired or blind, so I can't speak to how individuals in that group, can feel about the movie and everything. But as a disabled person myself, I would find this frustrating. As an autistic person, imagine an outbreak of autism happening and it leads to just society completely dissolving and our true human nature is revealed, basically using the disability as an allegory for the most dark parts of the human psyche. And that is something that's already used. People have a fear of an outbreak happening, to dehumanize people, especially those with higher needs. But either way, I wouldn't like my disability being used as a vehicle to explore the dark side of the human condition in that way. And for that to be used as something to reveal primal fears in us just doesn't feel right. It feels kind of icky, in my opinion. And then also, as a disabled person, I have been that way my whole life. So for a lot of us, that's just a way of life. So it being used as this like horror tactic or deeper allegory and metaphor, it just doesn't ring true, nor is it very impactful. And the author and others argued that it is just an allegory, and those who find it offensive simply don't understand it, which is also kind of belittling to tell people that they're just too stupid to understand, you know, such like high-minded literature. And honestly, that just makes me want to bash the book even more. So even while understanding the intent and the allegory, whatever, people still have a right to criticize it, especially when they're the ones being used to facilitate the author's messaging on human nature and how we turn a blind eye to things, you know, moral blindness. Disabled people already suffer from high unemployment rates, so I can see how depicting blind people as incapable of doing anything and essentially becoming depraved and losing their morality suddenly as a result of their blindness, I can see how that could be offensive to people. But besides those criticisms that people have, I personally just found the plot boring and I had a hard time suspending belief. So I'm going to go into spoiler territory now. If you don't want to see spoilers, click away. The blind are pretty much immediately thrown into this asylum under lockdown, with guards having orders to basically shoot anyone who tries to escape or who gets too close to the exit. And then they're locked in there for a pretty long time, or at least it feels that way. It just drags on and it gets boring and repetitive to read. And like I said, because the characters have no names and there's this constant point of view shifting, it's just hard to relate to anyone. And then the two women, or like kind of main women, are stereotypes also. So there's the angel, the doctor's wife, she's helping people, you know, all of this. And then there's the whore, the one who believed that she went blind because she was sleeping around. And then everyone else I just couldn't relate to, or like I have no thoughts. I have no thoughts on anyone. So overall, it just wasn't an enjoyable read. And obviously it wasn't going to be joyful because it's a dystopian, but the unique writing style and everything, a lot of people thought it was great. They think it got the message the message out well. But I didn't have that takeaway from it. I understand it's a metaphor and whatever, but I just had a hard time suspending belief. Maybe I'm more of an optimist. I don't know. I don't think I am, but I just don't think people would turn on each other that quickly, and that going blind or losing one of our senses would just make us like depraved individuals with no sense of morality anymore. And obviously there were people who I guess kept more of their morality, but I personally just don't find it very insightful or true. So anyways, I'm trying to DNF books that I'm not enjoying by the 30 to 40% mark, and that is the second one this year, so yay for me. If you watched this, thank you. If you read the book and have a different opinion of it, feel free to let me know. Maybe it will give me like a greater appreciation of the message. But anyways, thanks again.